I think so. To me, I might answer this a little bit differently, but like the most rewarding part, I would say, of writing for kids is when I get messages from parents or letters from kids or, emails even from older teens that happen to have read it, even though they're a little outside the target age range, telling me how much they enjoyed it or how much it meant to them. And especially when I've had a couple of people tell me that they were going to give up on their art or their writing or whatever, but these books kind of inspired them to keep going and to keep making art. And I feel like that's very, very meaningful to me. That's like kind of exactly what I was going for writing these. And to have that kind of feedback, I feel like is the greatest joy of writing for kids.
Hello and welcome back to A Literal Journey, a podcast all about fantastic authors of great stories. In today's episode, I'm chatting again with Carolyn Leiloglou, author of the Restorationists Series. Carolyn is the granddaughter of art collectors, daughter of an art teacher, and homeschooling mom to 4 wildly creative kids. She's an award-winning author whose poems and short stories have appeared in children's magazines around the world. Carolyn also reviews her favorite children's books on her online platforms. You can find her everywhere on House Full of Bookworms. Now, I actually follow her on Instagram. It's a great place. You should follow her there as well. Carolyn, welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much, Seth.
I say again because we just chatted we did an entire interview for about an hour almost.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the interview, I found out that it wasn't recording. So, Carolyn, first of all, I just want to thank you for your patience. That's
Absolutely.
very, very embarrassing, but it's just the sort
It
of
happens.
professionalism you can expect here at A Literal Journey. But thank you so much for agreeing to this interview.
Thank you for having me again.
Really quickly, let's just chat about your series, The Restorationists. I read your bio. I just read your bio. Give our listeners a bit of background on your own life. What led you to become a writer?
Yeah. So I had always wanted to be a writer. So ever since I read the Chronicles of Narnia in 4th grade, I knew that I wanted to write books for kids that would affect them the way that those books affected me. But then by the time I got to 6th grade, I had given up writing completely. And it wasn't that I didn't want to be a writer anymore. It was I didn't think I could do it because I was kind of one of those kids that school was easy for, but writing somehow wasn't. Like my ideas would peter out. I didn't know how to bring a project to completion. I was also a bad speller and had horrible handwriting. So I just thought, I can't do this writing thing. So it wasn't until after I had kids of my own that I started writing again. And the reason I feel like the story is important is because it's actually kind of the background for my main character, Vincent. He is going through that very same kind of angst in a way, is that he has given up instead of on writing is on art. He had a bad experience, felt like he was not good enough, and just wants nothing to do with art anymore, and is confronted with that throughout the book, having to own his own artistic journey and identity.
And so, tell us more about actually the Restorationist series. There's a magical ability that they have with paintings,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of go into that. And what was the magical spark behind
Yeah.
that idea?
Yeah. So The Restorationist takes place in a world just like ours, except that art is powerful, paintings are portals, and one family has been tasked with protecting them. So the story starts off with Beneath the Swirling Sky, which, as I said, is the story of Vincent. He is a 12-year-old kid who has given up on art after a bad experience, but then learns his family are the last restorationists and have the ability to travel into paintings and the duty to protect them. So when his little sister disappears, years into Van Gogh's The Starry Night, he and his cousin Georgia are the only ones who can rescue her. So it's got a lot of adventure. All the paintings they visit are real paintings, and they're listed in the back of the book. So kind of helps kids spark an interest in art. And the spark behind creating this book was I'd been in a writing webinar where they were walking us through different exercises. And one of them was to think about the most magical place from our childhood. And for me, that was always my grandparents' house. And like you heard in my bio, they were art collectors. I had paintings on every wall. But then in their kind of creepy upstairs, there was one room with just kind of stacks of paintings leaning against the wall. And so I started thinking like what kind of adventure could begin in a room like this? And for me, it had to be a fantastical adventure. I've always wanted to write fantasy. And then started thinking about what kind of character would need an adventure starting in a room full of art. And that was the birth of the Restorationists.
Now, in the series, there are the protagonists, the good guys, are basically the Restorationists.
Mhm.
But then the antagonists, the villains of the story, they're called distortionists, and they essentially either steal or distort artwork.
Mhm.
And I've wanted you to share this because I read this. Your family has a personal story
Yeah.
about art theft, and I just wanted you to share that, and then share the insight about the Lost Museum.
Yes. So this happened when I was little. I don't actually remember it, but it was always kind of family lore that I grew up knowing about. But as I said, my grandparents were art collectors, and at one point they had an art gallery on the San Antonio Riverwalk. And one day, a couple men walked in with a box cutter, cut a Norman Rockwell painting out of the frame with the box cutter. This is kind of a common tactic with art thieves, and then ran for it. And unfortunately, they were never found. They got the FBI involved in everything, but the painting was never recovered. And so that being kind of a backdrop of my childhood, maybe was I guess as Tolkien would call it, the leaf mold of my mind as I was thinking about writing this series. So yeah, having art heists at the core of it kind of made sense for me.
Now, your books blend a lot of art history, art context. I mean, the details about an artist's life. And the first book is really centered in a lot of ways on Vincent van Gogh's The Starry Night
Mhm,
painting.
mhm.
And you go into details about that, and you're sharing a lot of educational information, a lot of really good context with your readers, while at the same time your story is fast paced, it's engaging, it keeps readers interested. How do you manage that blend? How do you manage to be able to keep readers interested while also sharing important historical and context about art?
Yeah. Well, so I did a lot of research for the series, and I definitely appreciate when there's like interesting things that you're learning as you're reading a book. But I wanted to keep those things always like relevant to either the story or to a character's character development. So that's kind of like my guiding principle as I'm doing that. I feel like I had a good example in another series. I think they're called the Lost Art Mysteries by Darren R. Hicks. I think I got his name right, but the Van Gogh deception and the Rembrandt conspiracy, and those are just kind of fantastic art heist adventure stories with kids, and but they're not fantastical like mine. So I thought, well, how can I put a fantastical twist on an art heist type story? And yeah, that's kind of that's kind of how I followed it through. But I wanted those details and like the paintings per se to be real details, and so I tried to stay as true to real life as possible.
Early in your books, you talk about one of your characters talks about, and I believe it's Georgia.
Mhm.
She mentions God very explicitly, very candidly, um, in reference to Van Gogh painting, and she's talking about that. And I found it very refreshing. It's not something
Mm.
that you typically get in books that are intended for a younger audience,
Mm,
candid discussions about God. It's typically veiled, and it's under layers and things like that, and whatever the reader interprets. But it was very candid, and I found it very, very refreshing.
mm,
Particularly, I'm involved in a lot of ways in recovery programs and sobriety programs, and a lot of people that I know, they just appreciate just very candid discussions about
mm,
God. They're tired of God hiding, or
mm.
feeling like God is hiding from them. They want to read and learn about him.
Yeah.
And so I found that very refreshing, and I appreciated that. You used it as a way, when you brought up God in your books, you use it as a way to talk about how God is a creator, and then you've used the expression about how we are sub-creators. Could you elaborate on that in the context of your writing in your books?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting, like you bringing that up. Like kids can be very candid about God. I feel like they are not as afraid to talk about things as we are that might offend someone else or like be.
Right.
This idea of being a sub creator is something that comes from J.R. Tolkien, and he talks about God is the creator, and we're made in His image, and so we are also meant to create. Now we don't create out of nothing like God. We take, even as a writer, you're not creating out of nothing. You're creating out of your experiences and your conversations and the things that you've read or watched or whatever. Those are all coming together into what you're creating. But I really do feel like we're all made to create in some shape or form, not necessarily all as visual artists or writers or whatever, but that creativity is something that points to our creator and is glorifying to him, um, and is important and life giving for us to do because that's what we were made to do. So yeah, that's kind of a main theme in the book.
Yeah, well, I mentioned this in our previous interview, I guess I call it, but that I had read somewhere that so much of what we do in our lives, uh, so much of what our body is built for is just to support the work of our hands. So
Mm,
whatever we're creating or building or doing, like our whole body is designed just to support our hands to create.
mm,
Um, and then so much of what our hands create then go back and support our body. And so for whatever reason, God has designed us to to be constructive, to be builders, to be creative.
mm,
And if we're not fulfilling that purpose, I've noticed. I think I read it was The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. He talks about how people who aren't progressing, aren't moving forward in life in some way for some reason, and maybe
mm,
there's something legitimately holding them back. They can't quite get over. But if they're not progressing, if they're not building, if they're not creating, if they're not moving forward, they start to feel depressed.
mm,
And so, God, and I think God calls us to create not only because it's, he wants us to make art, but also he knows that's what's going to help us move forward. So,
yeah.
I really liked that theme in your books about, your main character. I can at least, this isn't a spoiler, but your
No.
main character, Vincent,
Uh-huh.
really struggles creating, and
Mhm.
that's what he has to learn. That's his hero's journey in a
Yeah,
way.
it is. Mhm.
So can you talk to us a little bit about your writing? I mean, you had mentioned in our previous interview that you started writing during COVID. Can you talk about that process of starting and then
Mhm.
coming to getting your book accepted and published?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd been writing picture books for a while. I do have a published picture book. It's back here, Library's Most Wanted. And that one came out in May of 2020. So obviously it bombed. It's like really meant for libraries and schools, and they were all closed. And so um, I thought my writing career was over at that point. But I had started writing this middle grade novel, Beneath This Rolling Sky. And even though I didn't really know what I was going to do with it, I didn't think my current agent would like it. I just kind of kept going. I had a few friends who encouraged me a lot. And so about a year later, I ended up at an online Christian children's writers conference. Even though I didn't think that I was writing for that market, I did feel like I'd written something that was too Christian for the secular market and not Christian enough for the Christian market. And so, but I like learning things, and I thought, well, I might as well just go to this conference and see what's up. And so I went and I found out that what I had written, it's considered a crossover book, I guess, was kind of exactly what they were looking for. And ended up connecting with an agent and editor at that conference. I'd broken up with my other agent about 4 months prior to that. And then, it had not even been my plan really to do middle grade yet. Even though I was writing this, I was hoping to keep publishing picture books until my kids were a little older, which they are now that we're launching book 3. I now have 2 in college. So it's been a little bit of a crazy journey trying to launch kids to college while also launching books. But
Yeah.
it's been really good. It was such a gift, and definitely see God's hand in the timing of it, even though it wasn't what I was expecting. It's been a really good journey.
Looking back on this trilogy, what is it that you feel, most proud of, or what really stands out to you about this journey that you've had in publishing and in writing these 3
Yeah.
books?
Yeah. I think so. To me, I might answer this a little bit differently, but like the most rewarding part, I would say, of writing for kids is when I get messages from parents, or letters from kids, or emails even from older teens that happen to have read it, even though they're a little outside the target age range, telling me how much they enjoyed it or how much it meant to them. And especially when I've had a couple of people tell me that they were going to give up on their art or their writing or whatever, but these books kind of inspired them to keep going and to keep making art. And I feel like that's very, very meaningful to me. That's like kind of exactly what I was going for writing these. And to have that kind of feedback, I feel like is the greatest joy of writing for kids.
I guess the question I would ask you is, you are a creator, you're making these books, you're making this art. At the same time that you're doing this, you're going through, there's COVID, you're homeschooling, you have these kids at home, and you are shaping them, you're cultivating their lives, you're helping them grow, you're helping them
Hmm.
become creators. What did you learn? What are some of the valuable lessons that you learned as as a creator,
Hmm.
helping these other creators
Yeah,
grow and become their own creators? You
that
got some
that's
in
a,
college right now.
I do. I have 2 in college, which
Yeah.
is kind of crazy. Um, it's been a really cool journey, and I will say, as a mom, like I don't want my creativity, my writing, or whatever to take away from my kids. But what I've seen is, as I've invested in being creative myself and making creative work, making time for that, is I've seen my kids take their own creativity more seriously, right? I feel like
Mm.
a lot of kids, if they don't necessarily see their parents investing in something creative, or like maybe the kids don't see it as creative. Like sometimes some adult activities are very creative, and they don't maybe seem as creative to kids, like gardening or cooking or whatever. But doing that and sharing it with my kids made them take their own creativity more seriously, and not feel like it was something that was childish that they had to put off. And so I have my older 2 are both pursuing creative careers right now. I guess we'll see where those lead. My oldest is studying screenwriting and directing, and and then
Wow.
my son is studying music composition and piano performance. And so that's kind of amazing to see that they are able and willing to take that seriously. And they've also seen that for me, it was a very long road. And I do try to encourage them that any creative career, it's going to take you about a decade to get established. So that's something, and it's not that all kids should be pursuing a creative career, but I do think that all kids and adults should be incorporating creativity into their lives, because that's kind of part of who we are, right? And and not incorporating that into your life, you're not living that full human experience that you were really made to have. So I would just encourage parents, if you've got kids at home, like, let them see you being creative. And if it's something that maybe a kid wouldn't naturally see as creative, like, oh, look, I combine these recipes together, or I planted the garden, or I, rearranged the house again, or or whatever it was. Like, this is how mommy likes to be creative. And and then relate that to them. Like, just let your kids see that as a value to you and something that's good and human and not just childish.
Yeah, that I like that because, my kids, they really do respond to, and it surprises me every single time.
Mhm.
Like, I want to do something creative and I'll be writing or working on something and they want to know about it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
why? Like, you got other things, go play, and they're like, no, what are you doing? And they
Yeah.
want to know. And then when you tell them about it, they remember it. I'm so shocked
Yeah.
because there's certain music that I listen to while I'm writing and I say, oh,
Mm.
this is a song I listened to help me write. And they,
Mhm.
can we listen to that song again? And it astounds me how much children respond to and appreciate your own creativity, your own talent and interests.
Yeah.
Never cease to amaze me. It's like,
Mhm.
other people aren't interested in this. Why are you interested in this?
Yeah.
But they love you unconditionally and they want to
Yeah.
know and they want to be a part of it. And that's
Yeah.
incredible.
Mhm.
Um, in the first book, you spend a great deal of time talking about uh, Vincent van Gogh and his painting, The Starry
Mhm.
Night, which is
Mhm.
probably one of his more well known
Mhm.
paintings. Um, and there is a context behind uh, that painting that I'm aware of. But I was wondering if you could share the context of that story and its importance in relation to creativity. If you could share that with our listeners.
Yeah. So, Van Gogh actually, he had most people know that he had a somewhat tumultuous life, and um, he actually painted The Starry Night while he was in a mental asylum. And he had checked himself in there after a very tumultuous time where he had kind of tried to start an artist colony in the Yellow House. That's in some of his paintings. And Paul Gauguin was the only one who had come. And then they had a very, I keep saying the word tumultuous relationship, which ended in Van Gogh cutting off his own ear and then checking himself into the asylum. And so it was a very difficult time for him, and he's trying to recover. But they let him have his an extra room there just for his paints and supplies, and he painted I think over 100 paintings while he was there. I could be wrong. I'm not great with numbers, but he painted a lot of paintings while he was there, and one of them was Starry Night. And he created that out of his imagination. Usually he liked to paint outside and paint what he could see, but he actually created that scene from other bits that he had seen before. And then obviously the sky is, I guess, an exaggeration. I like to say, like, he painted how a sky feels, right? Not how it looks. But he felt like that painting was a failure, and in fact, he really felt like most of his life was a failure because by the end of his life, he had only sold one painting, and which is astounding to us, knowing that he's one of the most famous artists and most beloved artists
Mhm.
that people know about. So yeah, I think it just goes to show, like, sometimes you're making something and you can't see the value of it, and but there is value in it, even if you can't see it at the time, even if it's not clear to you until later, or if ever. You don't know what effect that's going to have on other people, especially if you share it.
Well, on that note, and I haven't asked you this question before yet, even in our previous interview. What is your sorry, I have to keep referencing that. What is your metric for success? Because we just talked about how,
Mm,
Vincent van Gogh had only sold one painting. His life was
yeah.
by his measurement. And it wasn't the true way of seeing things, but by his measurement, he wasn't successful. His artistic life was not successful. What is your metric of success as an author?
Hmm. That's a really great question. Like,
Mhm,
I think, like what I said before, is that hearing from
mhm.
readers is kind of the thing that tells me that I'm successful, that I've done what I'm supposed to do. And I think just kind of, um that I know that I'm using, my God-given talents and time and investing into making good, true, and beautiful things, hopefully, and having to trust, that whichever ones of the books that I write that are supposed to be out in the world are going to get out in the world. I'm kind of in that waiting period right now, not knowing exactly what's next for my author career. I don't know if there's going to be more restorationist books or, I've written something else, but it's kind of in limbo right now. So, yeah, just kind of being faithful on my end, I think um, is how I can gauge my own success, and then like getting that feedback from readers is how I know that it's landing.
That's perfect. That's a perfect response, because in the Van Gogh painting, you had talked about how the like that in that Starry Night painting,
Mm,
the church is dark,
yeah.
but the homes are lit up,
Hmm.
and some have suggested that maybe that was Van Gogh's way of saying he didn't quite feel God in churches, but that perhaps in the homes, perhaps in nature, seeing the skies,
Yeah.
that's where he feels and understands God.
Yeah, he had a difficult relationship with the church. His father was a clergyman, and then he had tried to be a missionary for a while, and it kind of didn't work out. I guess the church didn't like the way he was approaching things, and he left kind of very disillusioned with the church, but not with God. Like he didn't lose his belief in God, and really did feel him and see him through nature. And I think that's really evident in the painting of the Starry Night. That's what I feel when I when I look at it.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah.
I think that's what a lot of people feel when they see it,
Mhm.
even though they don't understand the context behind it.
Yeah.
There's just something about heaven that is spoken
Mhm.
through a painting, and that was certainly true of I would say of your experience, where you're writing this during COVID, after the quote unquote failure of your first book. You carried on with faith to create,
Mm.
and now you're seeing a lot of success as an author, I would say. And but to go on, as I think is a good metric of success, is that you persist in
Mm.
creating things that you know produce more of those letters from children who are saying thank you so much for what you've written. And I that for
Yeah.
me is what my metric is of success is that, are my kids entertained by this? Do
Mm.
they learn and grow from what I've created? And
Yeah.
if that's what happens, and that's what I feel like I'm supposed to create this, then that's my
Yeah.
metric of success. And
Yeah.
whatever happens after that,
Hmm.
it'd be nice if it made a
It's
lot of
out of your
money, but
control after that, right?
it's
It's
out of your
yeah.
control after that. You'd like money, but maybe
Wouldn't that be nice?
God just wants to reward you with lessons, just little moral lessons. Last question I want to ask you: eh, eh, having written these books, what is it? What is the primary lesson that you want readers to walk away with? This podcast is a literal journey, because I feel like life is a journey, and as you're going down the path of life, people are bombarded with narratives, with what to believe
Mm.
about their life and how to find meaning in their journey.
Mm.
And eventually we become, or we live out, the stories that we believe about ourselves. And so it's
Mm.
important to give children, to give people a story to make their life more meaningful. And so with this series that you've written, what is it that you hope readers take away
Yeah.
from your story on their journey in life?
Yeah, so that's an easy one for me. It's the way I always sign copies of book one is you were made to create. That's what I really hope kids take away from this series, and come away feeling kind of inspired and ready to make new things and to see that as valuable.